"She'll cook for the fancy folks as our little joke," the scheming saloon owner declares, pointing at the dignified black woman clutching her worn leather satchel in the dusty Texas town square. The crowd erupts in cruel laughter, viewing her as perfect prey for their twisted entertainment. They whisper she'll be humiliated and run out of town within days, another victim of their vicious social games. But the wealthy cowboy heir watching from his horse feels something stir, an unexpected protectiveness toward this stranger who carries herself with mysterious grace. What neither the townsfolk nor the rich man realize is that their harmless prank will shatter every assumption about worth, power, and love in their rigid world. The black woman's hidden past threatens to expose truths that could elevate her above them all. While the cowboy's growing feelings risk destroying his family's carefully constructed empire, will their collision create salvation or devastation for both? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The stagecoach wheels kicked up clouds of red dust as they rolled to a stop in Crimson Ridge, Texas. Serafina Blackwood stepped down onto the wooden platform, her worn boots touching ground that felt as unforgiving as the stairs already burning into her back. She clutched her leather satchel close to her chest, the only remnant of a life she'd left behind in Louisiana. The town bustled with afternoon activity. Cowboys herded cattle through the main street while women in bustled dresses hurried between shops. Every face that turned her way hardened with the same cold calculation. She was different here, unwelcome. Sarah walked toward the general store, her spine straight despite the whispers that followed her steps. She needed supplies and information about work. The money in her pocket wouldn't last long, and she refused to touch the inheritance that came with strings she'd never accept. Inside the store, the clerk barely looked up from his ledger. She placed a list on the counter along with her coins. He counted the money twice before gathering her items with deliberate slowness. The bell above the door chimed as another customer entered. Ezekiel Thornfield owned the largest saloon in town and most of the politicians who frequented it. His eyes lit up when he spotted Sarah at the counter. A slow smile spread across his weathered face as an idea took shape in his mind. After Sarah left with her purchases, Zeke approached the clerk with obvious excitement. Within minutes, he'd learned everything about the mysterious woman who'd arrived alone. His plan formed quickly. The Sterling family was hosting their monthly dinner party next week. They'd need entertainment. The Sterling ranch sprawled across thousands of acres just outside town. Adelaide Sterling commanded her household with the same iron will her late husband had used to build their cattle empire. She sat in her parlor reviewing guest lists when Zeke arrived with his proposal. Her eyebrows raised with interest as he explained his idea. A joke at the expense of someone so clearly out of place would certainly amuse her guests. The woman would fail spectacularly, providing entertainment while demonstrating the natural order of things. Adelaide agreed without hesitation. Montgomery Sterling rode across his family's land with his childhood friend Tobias Fletcher beside him. The sun beat down on their backs as they checked the western fence line. Toby had grown up on the ranch, the son of their former foreman, and knew Monty better than anyone. Monty pulled his horse to a stop at the ridge overlooking town. Something felt hollow inside him lately. All the wealth and privilege meant nothing when every day felt exactly like the last. His mother had plans for his future that included marriage to a suitable woman and expansion of their business interests. None of it stirred any passion in him. The two men rode back toward the main house as the afternoon sun began to sink toward the horizon. Adelaide met them on the front porch, her excitement barely contained. She explained the arrangement she'd made with Zeke for their upcoming dinner party. Monty felt uneasiness settle in his stomach. The cruelty of the plan struck him immediately, but his mother had already committed to it. 20 of their most important neighbors would attend. The woman would be set up for public humiliation. The next morning, Sarah made her way to the Sterling Manor. The massive house rose from the prairie like a monument to wealth and power. She'd heard about the job through the general store clerk and knew it was likely her only opportunity for steady work. Adelaide received her in the grand foyer, looking down her nose with barely concealed disdain. The terms were simple: Sarah would prepare dinner for 20 guests in 3 days. If she succeeded, she'd be paid generously. If she failed, she'd leave town immediately. Sarah accepted the challenge without hesitation. She'd faced worse odds before and survived. Adelaide led her to the kitchen, a vast space with modern appliances and endless counter space. The lady of the house explained that she'd work alone with no assistance from the regular staff. The kitchen fell silent after Adelaide left. Sarah stood surrounded by gleaming surfaces and expensive equipment, understanding full well that this was meant to break her. The challenge was designed for failure, but they'd made one crucial mistake in their calculations. She set her leather satchel on the center counter and opened it carefully. Inside, wrapped in silk cloth, lay tools that belonged in the finest restaurants of New Orleans, professional knives with perfect balance, specialized utensils for advanced techniques, most importantly, a collection of handwritten recipes in elegant script. Sarah had trained under European masters before circumstances forced her west. Her education in the culinary arts rivaled anything found in the finest establishments. These people expected her to fail because they couldn't imagine her success. Their assumptions would be their downfall. She began planning the menu that would silence every critic in the dining room. 7 courses that would showcase skills they never expected her to possess. The joke was about to backfire in spectacular fashion. Monty found himself drawn to the kitchen that evening. He told himself he was checking on their guests' progress, but curiosity drove him more than duty. He expected to find chaos and panic. Instead, he discovered something extraordinary. The woman worked with precision and grace that spoke of years of professional training. Her movements were economical and confident. The aromas filling the kitchen suggested mastery rather than desperation. Everything about her challenged his mother's cruel expectations. Their eyes met across the kitchen space. In that moment, something shifted between them that neither could have predicted. The morning of the dinner party arrived with unseasonable heat. Sarah entered the Sterling kitchen before dawn, her leather satchel in hand and determination etched across her features. Today would either make or destroy her future in Crimson Ridge. Adelaide appeared in the doorway precisely at 7, dressed in her finest morning gown. She surveyed the empty kitchen with satisfaction, expecting to find evidence of panic or surrender. Instead, Sarah stood calmly at the center counter, already changed into a crisp white apron. The challenge was restated with cold precision. 20 guests, 7 courses, no assistance. Completion by 8 o'clock that evening. Adelaide's smile held the promise of public humiliation before she swept from the room. Sarah waited until the footsteps faded before opening her satchel. The silk wrapping fell away to reveal treasures that belonged in the finest culinary establishments of the world. Each knife gleamed with professional quality. Every tool served a specific purpose mastered through years of training. She lifted the first recipe card, written in her own careful script during her apprenticeship in New Orleans. The memories flooded back unbidden. Chef Auguste Beaumont, her mentor and distant relative, had demanded perfection from his students. The grueling hours in his kitchen had forged skills that few possessed. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency as she laid out ingredients. The Sterling pantry held provisions worthy of a restaurant, imported spices and aged wines that spoke of unlimited resources. They'd given her every tool she needed for their own downfall. The first course required delicate work with fresh oysters and champagne reduction. Her knife moved in precise strokes, creating perfect brunoise cuts that caught the morning light. Each motion carried the weight of European training and Creole tradition. Monty found reasons to pass through the kitchen throughout the morning. Each visit revealed new evidence of extraordinary skill. The woman worked with the confidence of a master chef, her techniques flawless and her timing impeccable. Nothing about her matched his mother's cruel expectations. By noon, the kitchen hummed with controlled energy. Multiple preparations advanced simultaneously while sauces simmered to perfection. The aromas alone suggested restaurant-quality cuisine that would shame the finest establishments in Dallas. Sarah had learned her craft in the kitchens of New Orleans' most exclusive restaurants. Her mentor had demanded excellence in classical French technique, while embracing the bold flavors of Creole cooking. She'd studied under masters who served European royalty and American millionaires alike. The training had been brutal and demanding. 16-hour days spent perfecting mother sauces and learning the precise temperatures for sugar work. Her hands bore tiny scars from countless cuts and burns that marked every serious chef, but the education had been worth every sacrifice. Her specialty lay in fusion cuisine that married French technique with Southern soul. She could prepare a perfect coq au vin or a flawless gumbo with equal expertise. Tonight's menu would showcase both traditions in ways her audience never expected. The afternoon brought increased activity as guests began arriving. Carriages filled the circular drive while Adelaide held court in the parlor. Anticipation crackled through the house as everyone prepared for the evening's entertainment. Sarah ignored the sounds of gathering crowds and focused on her final preparations. The beef Wellington required precise timing to achieve perfect doneness. The soufflé demanded absolute attention to temperature and technique. Every element must align perfectly for the symphony she was creating. Monty lingered in the kitchen doorway as evening approached. He watched her plate the first course with artistic precision, each dish a masterpiece of color and composition. Her movements held the grace of a trained professional who belonged in the world's finest restaurants. Their eyes met across the workspace. Something electric passed between them that had nothing to do with the evening's challenge. She saw past his privileged exterior to the man searching for authentic purpose. He recognized her strength and intelligence despite society's cruel dismissal. The dinner bell chimed at precisely 8 o'clock. Sarah had completed every course on schedule, each dish executed to perfection. The kitchen gleamed with the evidence of her mastery while 20 plates awaited service in the dining room. Adelaide entered expecting to find chaos and failure. Instead, she discovered cuisine that surpassed anything served in the finest hotels. The presentation alone suggested professional training that challenged every assumption about their evening's entertainment. The first course appeared before the assembled guests with theatrical precision. Oysters Rockefeller prepared with perfect technique and plated with artistic flair. Conversations quieted as the sophisticated flavors registered on surprised palates. Each subsequent course elevated expectations further. The soup course featured bisque that rivaled anything found in New Orleans' legendary restaurants. The fish course showcased techniques that required years of professional training to master properly. Murmurs of amazement replaced the anticipated laughter. Guests leaned forward in their chairs, discussing the extraordinary quality of each preparation. Someone suggested they'd hired a professional chef from one of the major cities. Adelaide's face grew pale as her cruel joke transformed into public praise. The woman in her kitchen possessed skills that surpassed anything available locally. Her guests were experiencing cuisine worthy of the finest establishments in America. The meat course arrived as the evening's crescendo. Beef Wellington, with perfect pink centers and flaky pastry that shattered at first touch. The accompanying sauce demonstrated classical French technique executed without flaw. Conversations turned to speculation about the mysterious chef's background. Several guests recognized techniques they'd encountered only in Europe's most celebrated restaurants. The level of skill suggested formal training under renowned masters. Monty rose from his chair as dessert appeared before the stunned gathering. The moment had arrived for truth to replace assumption and dignity, to triumph over cruelty. The dessert course silenced the entire dining room. Sarah's crème brûlée arrived with sugar work that belonged in Parisian patisseries. Each spoonful revealed layers of vanilla bean custard and caramelized sugar that crackled perfectly under gentle pressure. Judge Harrison set down his spoon and stared at Adelaide with undisguised amazement. The man had dined in the finest establishments across 3 states and recognized mastery when he tasted it. His wife nodded in agreement, her eyes wide with appreciation. Mrs. Whitmore leaned toward her husband and whispered urgent questions about the chef's identity. She'd spent considerable money importing a cook from Chicago and had never experienced cuisine of this caliber. The entire gathering buzzed with curiosity and praise. Adelaide's hands trembled as she lifted her water glass. Every face around her table showed the same expression of wonder and satisfaction. Her cruel entertainment had transformed into a celebration of extraordinary talent. The joke had backfired beyond her worst nightmares. Judge Harrison cleared his throat and addressed the table with judicial authority. He demanded to know the identity of the chef who had created such remarkable cuisine. Other guests voiced similar requests, their earlier anticipation of mockery replaced by genuine admiration. Adelaide's voice caught in her throat as she attempted to respond. The truth would expose her participation in Zeke's cruel scheme, while revealing her complete miscalculation. She'd expected failure and humiliation, but had witnessed artistry that surpassed professional standards. Monty rose from his chair with quiet determination. His mother's discomfort was evident to everyone present, and the moment demanded honest acknowledgement. He'd watched Sarah work throughout the day and understood the magnitude of her achievement. He spoke clearly to the assembled guests, ensuring every word carried across the hushed dining room. The extraordinary meal had been prepared by Miss Seraphina Blackwood, working entirely alone in their kitchen. Her skill and dedication deserved their highest praise and respect. The announcement sent ripples of surprise through the gathering. Several guests had assumed the Sterling family had secretly hired a renowned chef from New Orleans or San Francisco. The reality challenged their preconceptions about ability and training. Adelaide's face flushed crimson as she realized the full scope of her humiliation. Her guests would remember this evening as a triumph of unexpected excellence rather than the cruel entertainment she'd promised. Word would spread throughout the county within days. Dr. Peterson inquired about Miss Blackwood's background and training. The level of technique suggested formal education under European masters. He'd traveled extensively and recognized skills that required years of professional development to achieve. Monty felt pride swell in his chest as he described Sarah's grace under pressure and unwavering professionalism. She'd faced an impossible challenge with dignity and had transformed it into a showcase of extraordinary talent. Her character matched her culinary abilities. The guests began requesting opportunities to hire Miss Blackwood for their own events. Mrs. Whitmore offered double her current cook's salary for exclusive services. Judge Harrison suggested she establish a restaurant in town that would attract visitors from neighboring counties. Adelaide struggled to maintain composure as her evening spiraled beyond her control. She'd intended to demonstrate social superiority through public humiliation, but had instead elevated the target of her cruelty to heights beyond her own reach. In the kitchen, Sarah cleaned her tools with the same precision she'd used in their preparation. Every surface gleamed while her leather satchel lay open on the counter. She'd heard the conversations from the dining room and understood the magnitude of her victory. The skills that had saved her tonight came from the most difficult period of her life. After leaving her family's plantation in Louisiana, she'd sought refuge with Chef Auguste Beaumont, a distant relative who'd built his reputation in New Orleans' finest establishments. His kitchen had been a crucible of learning where failure meant dismissal and excellence barely earned acknowledgement. She'd worked 18-hour days mastering classical techniques while learning the bold flavors that defined Creole cuisine. Every cut on her hands told a story of dedication and sacrifice. The training had transformed her from a sheltered plantation daughter into a master chef capable of competing with anyone in America. She'd absorbed lessons from Auguste's European education while adding her own innovations that elevated traditional recipes to artistic heights. Monty appeared in the kitchen doorway as she finished packing her tools. Their eyes met across the workspace where she'd achieved her impossible triumph. Something had shifted between them during the evening that neither could deny or ignore. He stepped forward to offer his personal congratulations and formal apology for his family's intentions. Her dignity throughout the ordeal had impressed him more than her extraordinary culinary skills. She'd faced cruelty with grace and had answered it with excellence. Adelaide entered the kitchen with visible reluctance, her guests having departed with effusive praise for the evening's cuisine. Her scheme had not only failed, but had elevated Sarah to a position of respect and demand throughout the community. She offered Sarah permanent employment at wages that exceeded anything available locally. The position would include private quarters and complete authority over the kitchen. Her tone suggested desperate damage control rather than genuine appreciation. Sarah accepted the offer with quiet dignity, understanding that her victory was complete. She'd entered this house as the target of cruel entertainment and had emerged as its most valuable asset. The leather satchel that held her professional tools now represented power, rather than mere survival. The evening had changed everything for both women. Adelaide's cruel joke had been exposed, while Sarah's hidden talents had elevated her beyond anyone's expectations. The balance of power in their relationship had shifted permanently. As Sarah settled into her new quarters that night, she knew tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. Her culinary triumph had opened doors throughout the county while establishing her reputation as a master chef worthy of respect and admiration. The weeks following the dinner party transformed life at Sterling Manor in ways Adelaide never anticipated. Sarah established herself in the kitchen with quiet authority, creating an atmosphere of warmth and efficiency that drew people like moths to flame. Her morning preparations filled the house with aromas that spoke of comfort and excellence. Monty found himself inventing reasons to visit the kitchen throughout each day. He'd arrive claiming to check on household supplies, but would linger to watch Sarah work her culinary magic. Their conversations began with simple pleasantries, but gradually deepened into discussions about dreams and aspirations. Sarah spoke of her desire to open her own restaurant, a place where fine cuisine would welcome all who appreciated excellence regardless of their background. Her eyes lit up when describing the fusion of French technique and Southern tradition she'd perfected during her training in New Orleans. Monty shared his own frustrations with inherited wealth that came without purpose. He'd grown up expecting to manage the family ranch, but yearned for something more meaningful than simply maintaining what others had built. Their conversations revealed kindred spirits trapped by societal expectations. Adelaide watched these interactions with growing alarm. Her son's frequent kitchen visits had not gone unnoticed by the household staff or their regular visitors. The warmth in his voice when speaking of Sarah suggested feelings that threatened everything she'd planned for his future. Meanwhile, Zeke Thornfield nursed his wounded pride in the saloon, where his scheme had become the subject of bitter mockery. His plan to humiliate Sarah had elevated her to heights of respect and demand throughout the county. Patrons joked about his spectacular miscalculation while ordering drinks he served with gritted teeth. He began spreading whispered insinuations about the nature of Sarah's relationship with Monty. The young man's obvious admiration provided fertile ground for rumors designed to poison the community against both of them. His wounded ego demanded revenge against the woman who'd made him look foolish. The Sterling family received an invitation to host the county's annual harvest celebration, an honor that typically rotated among the wealthiest ranchers. Adelaide accepted eagerly, seeing an opportunity to restore her social standing while showcasing their elevated status through Sarah's extraordinary cuisine. Sarah threw herself into preparations for the elaborate outdoor feast that would feed over 100 guests. She designed a menu that would demonstrate her versatility while managing the logistical challenges of cooking for such a large gathering. The event would either cement her reputation or expose her limitations. Monty worked alongside her during the planning stages, his enthusiasm for the project growing with each discussion. He suggested incorporating local ingredients and regional specialties that would celebrate their community while showcasing her sophisticated techniques. Their partnership felt natural and harmonious. Adelaide observed their collaboration with increasing anxiety. Her son's protective instincts towards Sarah had become obvious to anyone watching their interactions. The way his face lit up when entering the kitchen spoke of emotions that transcended professional appreciation. The harvest celebration arrived with perfect autumn weather that drew families from across 3 counties. Tables stretched across the Sterling's front lawn, while musicians prepared to entertain the massive gathering. The success of the event would determine the family's social standing for years to come. Sarah orchestrated the meal service with military precision, directing temporary staff while maintaining quality control over every dish. Her barbecue demonstrated mastery of traditional techniques, while her side dishes elevated familiar flavors to restaurant quality. The crowd's enthusiastic response validated her careful planning. Monty moved through the gathering, accepting compliments on behalf of their extraordinary chef, while ensuring Sarah received proper credit for her achievements. His pride in her accomplishments was evident to everyone present, including several prominent ranchers who exchanged meaningful glances. Judge Harrison approached Monty during the evening's festivities to express his admiration for Miss Blackwood's remarkable talents. He mentioned his own daughter's upcoming wedding and his desire to secure Sarah's services for the reception. The conversation carried undertones about Monty's obvious attachment to their chef. Dr. Peterson joined the discussion with similar praise while making pointed observations about the young Sterling heir's frequent mentions of Miss Blackwood's character and intelligence. The older men's knowing smiles suggested they recognized the signs of a man falling in love. Monty felt heat rise in his cheeks as he realized how transparent his feelings had become. He'd spoken of Sarah with an enthusiasm that revealed emotions he'd barely acknowledged to himself. The weight of social expectations pressed down on him like a physical burden. Adelaide intercepted several conversations among her female guests that centered on her son's apparent fascination with their hired chef. The women spoke in hushed tones about impropriety and the dangers of allowing such situations to develop unchecked. Their disapproval was both clear and threatening. As the evening wound down and guests began departing, Adelaide's anxiety reached a breaking point. She'd overheard enough pointed comments and knowing looks to understand that her son's feelings were becoming public knowledge. The situation required immediate intervention. She waited until the last guest had departed before confronting Sarah in the kitchen. The conversation began with forced politeness, but quickly revealed Adelaide's true concerns about her son's obvious attachment and the social implications of his feelings. Adelaide offered Sarah a substantial sum of money to leave Crimson Ridge immediately. She presented the payment as recognition of exceptional service while making clear her expectations about accepting the generous offer. The underlying threat remained unspoken, but unmistakable. Sarah listened with quiet dignity before refusing the bribe with calm certainty. She'd found her place in this community through honest work and exceptional skill. No amount of money would convince her to abandon the life she'd built or the dreams she was finally positioned to achieve. The confrontation ended with both women understanding exactly where they stood. Adelaide's desperation had been exposed while Sarah's strength had been demonstrated once again. The morning after Adelaide's failed bribe attempt brought unexpected visitors to Crimson Ridge. Two well-dressed men in expensive suits stepped down from an ornate carriage bearing Louisiana license plates. Their refined appearance and obvious wealth drew curious stares from townspeople as they made inquiries about a woman named Seraphina Beaumont. Sarah was preparing lunch when word reached the kitchen about the strangers asking specific questions about her true identity. Her hands stilled on the knife she'd been using to dice vegetables. The name they sought belonged to a life she'd deliberately left behind, consequences she'd hoped would never follow her to Texas. The visitors registered at the hotel under the names Robert Beaumont and Charles Rousseau. They carried themselves with the authority of men accustomed to getting answers and possessed resources to ensure cooperation. Their presence in town sent ripples of speculation through every business establishment and parlor. Sarah found reasons to avoid the main streets during her usual errands. She sent kitchen staff to the market while remaining within the safety of Sterling Manor's grounds. The anxiety that gripped her was unlike anything she'd experienced since arriving in Crimson Ridge. Her carefully constructed new identity was under threat. Monty noticed her unusual behavior immediately. The confident woman who'd faced down Adelaide's cruelty now seemed constantly looking over her shoulder. Her hands trembled slightly while preparing meals, and she startled at unexpected sounds. Something had frightened her badly. He approached her during the quiet afternoon hours, when the kitchen was empty except for them. His gentle inquiries about her distress met with evasive responses that only deepened his concern. She deflected his questions while maintaining the professional distance she'd recently allowed to soften between them. Toby Fletcher brought troubling news from town during his evening visit to the main house. The strangers had been asking detailed questions about Miss Blackwood's arrival and current employment. They'd shown particular interest in her background and any mention of her past before reaching Texas. Adelaide learned of the mysterious visitors through her network of social connections throughout Crimson Ridge. Mrs. Whitmore reported overhearing conversations that suggested legal matters and family obligations. The revelation that Sarah might have a criminal past validated Adelaide's worst suspicions about the woman. She confronted her son that evening with demands for immediate action. If their chef was hiding from legal troubles, the family's reputation could be damaged beyond repair. Association with someone fleeing justice would destroy everything they'd built in the community over decades. Monty defended Sarah with passion that revealed the depth of his feelings to his mother. He refused to believe she was capable of wrongdoing and insisted they trust her character rather than succumb to unfounded speculation. His loyalty impressed Adelaide even as it terrified her about his emotional investment. The strangers spent their second day in town gathering information from various sources. They visited the general store, the bank, and several other establishments where Sarah had conducted business. Their methodical approach suggested professional investigators rather than casual inquiries. Zeke Thornfield saw opportunity in the mysterious visitors and their obvious wealth. He approached them at the hotel bar with offers of information about Miss Blackwood's activities and associations. His wounded pride over the dinner party disaster made him eager to cause trouble for the woman who'd embarrassed him. The men listened politely to Zeke's insinuations about improper relationships and questionable behavior. They showed particular interest in his descriptions of Sarah's close working relationship with Montgomery Sterling and the family's obvious dependence on her services. Sarah's anxiety increased as reports of the stranger's activities reached her through various channels. They were systematically investigating every aspect of her life in Crimson Ridge, while clearly possessing knowledge of her true identity. The confrontation she'd hoped to avoid forever was approaching rapidly. She spent sleepless nights considering her options. Flight would mean abandoning everything she'd built, but staying might expose secrets that could destroy not only her future, but potentially harm the Sterling family. Her association with them had already drawn unwanted attention to their household. The third morning brought direct contact when the visitors appeared at Sterling Manor's front door. They requested a private meeting with Miss Serafina Beaumont, using her real surname for the first time since her arrival in Texas. The moment of reckoning had finally arrived. Adelaide received them in the formal parlor while sending word for Sarah to join them immediately. Her curiosity about the mysterious visitors warred with her growing fear about what their presence might mean for her family's reputation and her son's obvious attachment to their chef. Monty insisted on being present for whatever discussion was about to take place. His protective instincts toward Sarah overrode social protocol as he positioned himself as her ally rather than simply her employer. The gesture did not go unnoticed by anyone in the room. Sarah entered the parlor with quiet dignity, despite the fear evident in her eyes. She faced the visitors with the same courage she'd shown during Adelaide's cruel dinner party challenge. Whatever they'd come to discuss, she would meet it with her head held high. Robert Beaumont stood as she entered, his familial resemblance immediately apparent to everyone present. His expression mixed relief at finding her with frustration at the difficulty of their search. Charles Rousseau remained seated, but watched her with the calculating gaze of a legal professional. The truth about Sarah's identity and the reasons for her flight from Louisiana were about to be revealed. Everything she'd built in Crimson Ridge now hung in the balance as her past finally caught up with her carefully constructed new life. The moment that would change everything had finally arrived. Robert Beaumont's voice carried the authority of old Louisiana money as he addressed the assembled group in Adelaide's parlor. He identified himself as Sarah's cousin and legal representative of the Beaumont estate. Charles Rousseau served as the family's attorney, specializing in inheritance matters and property disputes. The revelation struck Adelaide like a physical blow. Sarah was not the penniless woman fleeing trouble that she'd assumed. The Beaumont name commanded respect throughout the South, representing generations of wealth built on sugar plantations and shipping enterprises. Their family's fortune rivaled anything in Texas. Sarah had fled Louisiana 2 years earlier after refusing an arranged marriage to a man twice her age. Her father had demanded she wed Auguste Martineau, a wealthy planter whose alliance would strengthen business connections between their families. Her refusal had resulted in complete disinheritance and banishment from their estate. The legal documents Rousseau produced told a different story. Sarah's grandfather had established a trust fund that bypassed her father's control, maturing on her 25th birthday regardless of family approval. The inheritance included cash assets, property holdings, and business interests worth more than most people earned in several lifetimes. Monty listened in stunned silence as the lawyers explained Sarah's true financial position. She possessed wealth that exceeded his family's ranch holdings by a substantial margin. The woman he'd fallen in love with had been hiding an inheritance that made her one of the richest individuals in the territory. Adelaide struggled to process the information that completely overturned her understanding of their situation. The woman she'd tried to bribe and dismiss commanded resources that dwarfed the Sterling family fortune. Her cruel jokes and condescending behavior had been directed at someone who could buy their ranch without financial strain. Sarah accepted the legal papers with quiet dignity, her hands steady despite the magnitude of the moment. She'd known this day would eventually arrive, but had hoped to establish herself independently before facing her family's demands. The timing threatened everything she'd built in Crimson Ridge. Zeke Thornfield chose that moment to make his dramatic entrance, having learned of the morning's revelations through his network of informants throughout town. He saw opportunity for profit in exposing what he assumed was fraud or deception. His timing proved spectacularly unfortunate. He burst into the parlor with accusations about Sarah's deception and demands that she face consequences for misleading the community. His crude threats and obvious attempts at blackmail revealed his true character to everyone present, including the wealthy Louisiana visitors who observed his behavior with disgust. Sarah rose from her chair with newfound confidence, the legal documents in her hand representing power she'd never chosen to exercise. She announced her intention to purchase property in Crimson Ridge for her restaurant using her inheritance funds. The establishment would bear the Beaumont name and uphold the family's tradition of excellence. The announcement silenced Zeke's bluster immediately. His face drained of color as he realized he'd just threatened one of the wealthiest women in the territory. His crude behavior in front of respected legal representatives had destroyed any credibility he might have possessed. Monty stepped forward with determination that surprised everyone in the room, including himself. He declared his intention to court Sarah properly, with full knowledge of her true identity and financial independence. His feelings had nothing to do with wealth or social position, and everything to do with her character and intelligence. Adelaide sat in stunned silence as her world realigned around these shocking revelations. The woman she'd treated with cruel condescension possessed more social standing and financial resources than anyone in their community. Her son's attachment now represented an advantageous match rather than social catastrophe. The lawyers completed their business efficiently, transferring control of Sarah's inheritance and providing documentation of her legal status. They expressed satisfaction at finding her well-established and clearly thriving despite her family's harsh treatment. Their approval of her choices was evident. Zeke's humiliation deepened as word of the morning's events spread throughout Crimson Ridge. His attempt to blackmail and intimidate a member of one of Louisiana's most prominent families marked him as a fool and a social pariah. Business at his saloon declined immediately as respectable customers sought other establishments. 6 months later, construction was completed on Beaumont's Table, the finest restaurant between San Antonio and Dallas. Sarah's vision of elegant dining that welcomed all who appreciated excellence became reality through her careful planning and unlimited resources. The establishment drew visitors from neighboring states. The grand opening celebration filled the restaurant with guests who traveled hundreds of miles to experience Sarah's renowned cuisine. Judges, cattle barons, and society ladies mingled in the dining room that represented the fulfillment of her dreams and the triumph of her determination. Monty found Sarah in the kitchen during a quiet moment between service courses. The space buzzed with controlled energy as her staff prepared dishes that would cement the restaurant's reputation for excellence. She belonged here completely, commanding respect through skill and vision. He presented her with a ring that had belonged to his grandmother, asking for her hand in marriage, surrounded by the aromas and sounds of her greatest achievement. Their love had grown from mutual respect and shared dreams rather than social expectations or financial considerations. Adelaide hosted their engagement party with genuine enthusiasm, having grown to appreciate Sarah's intelligence, dignity, and positive influence on her son. The event celebrated not just their union but the transformation of their entire community's understanding of worth and respect. Sarah stood on the restaurant's front porch as the sun set over Crimson Ridge, watching the town that had initially rejected her now flourish with the prosperity her establishment brought. She'd arrived with nothing but skill and determination, transforming both her own life and the community that had tried to break her. The leather satchel that had once held her only possessions now rested in a place of honor in her office, a reminder of the journey that had brought her from desperate refugee to successful businesswoman and beloved fiancé.